All right, let's take our second phone call of the Kentucky Tonight program. Ms. Mary Hatfield from Harrison County. Ms. Hatfield, a question for Kentucky Tonight.
Yes, please. I saw a commercial on television today, Rand Paul against Jack Conway, and it insinuated that he was against abortion, but Jack Conway was for abortion. Jack Conway, I've met him. He told me he was a Christian. And what I would like to know, since both of them confess to be Christians, I'm a little bit nervous, so you'll have to forgive me. But
you want to know their position on abortion?
I would like to know both candidates' views, and are they for or against, and if they're against it, what are they going to do to stop it? And that's my question. All
right, Ms. Hatfield, thanks very much. You heard the question. Dr. Paul.
I'm 100% pro-life. I believe that life begins at conception and would support a human life amendment to the Constitution.
I am a Christian. I think abortion ought to be as rare as we can make it. I would support parental notification. I would support restrictions. It ought to be as rare as we can make it, but safe and legal. So I think at the end of the day, I probably come down on the libertarian view on this, that government ought not be telling women what to do.
Anything else on that you want to clarify?
Sounds like it's a pretty distinct difference.
Education, gentlemen. The world is becoming increasingly well-educated. As you know, China and India are now gaining momentum. They have more graduates with bachelor's degrees than the United States. What's the role of the U.S. Department of Education in ensuring Americans have access to the highest quality of education so that we can be prepared to battle in the global market? Mr. Conway?
A supportive role. I worked for an education governor, Bill. I worked for an education governor, as you know, for about 6 years. I helped write the Higher Education Reform Act of 1997. I know that Kentucky has to get more educated as a society if we're going to compete with Indiana and Tennessee and Ohio and Virginia, much less China and India. And I'm very concerned about a couple of things. I mean, I think we've worked on KIRA here, and we've tried to have rewards and accountability at the elementary and secondary level. We've tried to reform higher education. I think we need to be committed as a state. I think this is a role for a senator, a governor, private citizens, to making certain we have early childhood education, because the child who can't read at 7 is a likely dropout at 16. And I know from putting together budgets in Frankfort that depending on the year, between 6 and 10% of the budget comes from federal sources. But those are important monies. If you were to take that out of the State Board of Education, they would really be hurting in the area of IDEA or Title I. I also know that there's a role for the federal government in helping young people afford college. What we're doing in this country right now, we're really good at getting kids into college. We're #1 in the country, but our retention and actually graduating them is dropping off. I think we're now number 9 in the entire world in terms of graduates. So I'm glad the federal government's now saying we're going to lend directly. We're going to have a longer period of time for young people to pay off their loans. We have to make certain we continue with Pell Grants and Stafford loans and make it easier for young people to afford education. I don't want to see any young person drop out of college because they can't afford it. And I think doing away with the Department of Education would really hurt young people who want to further their education.
You wouldn't cut federal money to support Pell Grants and other
No, I
aid
would
to
not.
Kentucky?
Absolutely not. We have to get more educated, not less.
Mr. Paul, what's your position?
Well, I think that the Department of Education basically has doubled in size. I think that No Child Left Behind is a mistake. Interestingly, if you talk to teachers around Kentucky, you'll find that most teachers agree with me. I would probably say 90% of teachers agree with me. No Child Left Behind is a mandate by the federal government that comes in and interferes with the local education of our kids. The other thing you hear is not only a dislike for No Child Left Behind, but you hear an extreme dislike for the idea of unfunded mandates. In fact, you hear this throughout all of county government and city government and state government, that the federal government comes in and tells you, if you're the superintendent of schools in Warren County, tells you what to do, tells you where your money can be spent, and they can't make decisions. So in the end, money's being spent in one area and the kids don't have pencils or computers. So really you need to allow superintendents, I'm for more local control, superintendents, teachers, parents, families, the local community needs to be more involved. And I don't want less
on higher ed from the Department of Education, from the Federal Department of Education. Would you suggest that Pell Grants and student loans be cut?
No, but what I would do to them is make them, if we can do what I have proposed, which is get rid of the Department of Education, things that we want to keep I would put into other departments. But for the most part, I think we've gone too far towards federal involvement in our education for most of our history. Until like 1979 or 1980, Ronald Reagan ran on the platform of eliminating the newly formed Department of Education because we as Republicans always believed in more local control of schools, parents, teachers, superintendents. We think we can figure out things better at a local level rather than transmitting those powers and sending that money to Washington. I'd rather keep that money here in Kentucky.
Well, there are a lot of people in the Commonwealth of Kentucky watching this program right now who have gone and gotten a higher education on a Pell Grant or with a Stafford loan or on the GI Bill. And to say that you want to do away with the Department of Education, just shift the money elsewhere. I mean, he was talking to me a few moments ago about how, I'm too simple or something like that, or simplifying stuff. That sounds simple, but the fact of the matter is you're eliminating Pell Grants, you're eliminating the assistance to young people who just want to further their education.
Doesn't sound like that's what I said. I said we'd transfer them to other departments.
Gentlemen, on cap and trade, if the original bill is dead, what sort of energy bill could you support? And would it include measures relating to Kentucky coal and state energy costs? Dr. Paul?
I think cap and trade would be a disaster for our economy. I think hundreds of thousands of jobs could be lost in our state, not only in the eastern part of the state and the western coal fields. Up in Henderson, we have two aluminum plants up there that employ 1,500 people. Those jobs will be lost. Now, this is a clear distinction because early on, Jack has been for cap and trade. Paducah Sun reported that he sent them a statement in support of it. Bowling Green Daily News reported it. Even the progressive blogger Jake Payne has said he's had many conversations, personal conversations with Jack, and Jack has expressed his interest for cap and trade. Now, once he found out it was unpopular, we're seeing the other side of things. So he was for it before he was against it. But cap and trade, Kentucky will not tolerate ambivalence on this. I think we're seeing ambivalence at the very best. That'd be the most charitable description of his position. But I will oppose cap and trade, and I will oppose President Obama tooth and nail, and I will work to rein in the extra power.
Let me clarify your
position. There's nothing to clarify. I'm against cap and trade, and always have been. I'm against cap and trade. I will stand up for the Kentucky coal industry. My opponent has said on the record that coal is one of the least favorable forms of energy. He's also said that we need to take federal mine safety regulations back to where they were in the 1930s. Bill, I think that we can stand up for Kentucky coal, and we can also stand up for those who mine it. I understand how important Kentucky coal is. I worked on thin seam tax credits for mining Kentucky coal when I worked for a coal governor. I worked on redoing some of our industrial development pieces of legislation so that Peabody Coal could reinvest in my father's home county of Union County about 10 years ago. I understand how important Kentucky coal is, but you know what? He can talk about my position all he wants. I'm against cap and trade. It is dead. But when the EPA stepped forward and tried to do administratively what the Congress had decided not to do, I, as the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, filed an action to say that Kentucky doesn't think that the EPA can do this. So he can try to characterize my position or put words into my mouth all he wants. The Lexington Herald leader said that the ad that they're running now claiming I was ever for cap and trade is false. I'm against cap and trade, and I stepped up with governmental action for the people of Kentucky and to protect Kentucky.
Did you have an opportunity to join the lawsuit with the governor and the Kentucky Coal Association against the EPA?
Well, it was just filed about a week ago, and the governor went ahead and directed his cabinet to do it. We're looking at that right now to see if we have a sign-on from the AG's office.
I tell both of you and the viewers, quickly on Medicare and Social Security. We don't have time to go into a full debate on this. Clarify your positions on both of those and how you would think that they, adjusting that, if that's the correct word, would reduce the deficit.
Well, I think we're short of money in Social Security and Medicare simply for demographic reasons. We talked about it earlier. We used to have many workers and few retirees. Now we're getting to a time where we're going to have one worker and one retiree. Everybody's heard the term baby boomers. They're getting ready to retire, and we have to figure out how to pay for them. I think you will have to make some difficult decisions, not on current retirees. So it is a misstatement. That's a pleasant way of putting it, of the facts to say, because I do not support raising the deductible, and I do not support changing anything for current seniors, but for younger people like myself, there may be have to changes. There may have to be age changes, there may have to be deductible changes, but on the younger folks, and it probably should be directed more towards means and still with consideration. We do have that consideration. Medicare, the 20% now, is picked up for those in poverty situations by Medicaid, and that would continue.
Dr. Paul, Mr. Conway, something will have to be done. Would you agree with any of these methods?
No. Rand's prescription is wrong for Kentucky. In the Kentucky that I see, with the seniors with whom I speak, they can't afford a 23% national sales tax. They can't afford a $2,000 deductible on Medicare. And they can't afford a U.S. senator who says Social Security is a Ponzi scheme that ought to be privatized. Imagine if we'd privatized Social Security 6 or 7 years ago when President Bush wanted to do it, and then the stock market tanked. Boy, we'd be in a hell of a pickle right now. Now, let me tell you this. Here's what we need to do. We need to make certain that Medicare can engage in bulk purchasing, negotiate for lower prescription rates the way I talked about earlier in the program. Doing that would save $200 billion and help shore up the program. We need Medicare fraud units in each and every state. That's a potential $100 billion in additional savings. And we need to stand by Social Security. I mean, Social Security is not an investment club. It's a social insurance program that's designed to keep people from starving to death. And I'm sick and tired of all these politicians coming along and saying they want to privatize Social Security. I will never do that.
Gentlemen, as we wrap up, a final question. Kentucky is and has been the home to many admired statesmen and effective political leaders, from Abraham Lincoln and Henry Clay to the current day of Wendell Ford and Mitch McConnell. Which Kentucky politician most inspired you and influenced your public life? Mr. Conway?
Wow, I've known some great Kentucky politicians. I think of Crit Llewellyn as a big sister, and she's the godmother to my daughter Eva, because I saw it as a higher power calling when my daughter was born on her birthday. Paul Patton taught me work ethic, but I think the experience I had at 18 years of age when I first went in to meet with Wendell Ford, he gave me all his time. He showed me all around the office building. I had a remarkable experience with him just a couple months ago, where we went back to the Capitol. Every elevator operator, people working in the bathroom came out and said, "This is the nicest man to ever grace the halls of the U.S. Senate." What an enduring legacy, and I would love to be just like that.
Dr. Paul?
Well, when I got started in this race, actually to defend Jim Bunning against attacks. And I know a lot of people have attacked him, but you know, the one thing I really admired about him is that he wasn't afraid to stand on principle. When the Congress and the Senate passed pay-as-you-go and said, let's don't add to the debt, let's pay off things as we go, let's not add to the debt, when nobody else would stand up and was brave enough to stand on the floor, Senator Bunning stood up and said, enough's enough. He also stood up and said the bank bailout was wrong. Many people can come later and say they would have opposed it, but he stood up and on principle voted the way he believed was right for Kentucky, and I'm proud of him for that.
Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
My pleasure,
and
Bill.
good luck next week.
Thank you, Bill.
Next Monday on our Election Eve edition of Kentucky Tonight, scheduled guests are state Democratic and Republican Party leaders Daniel Logston and Steve Robertson, along with Jennifer Moore and John David Dyke. Our election night will begin reporting returns during the news hour. Then at 8, 7 Central, join Renee Shaw and me for a full viewing and a full evening of live coverage on KET and online. And don't forget, Comment on Kentucky with Farrell Wellman this Friday night at 8, 7 Central.